This is the Tesla Model 3, and to be honest, it's getting on a bit now. It was first launched in 2017 back in the US. So why would you buy one of these when you could have a BMW i4, a BYD Seal, or perhaps even the new VW ID.7? All of those are newer models that you might imagine would be even better. Well, that's what we're going to be finding out today, but first, this video is supported by PodPoint, winner of our 2023 Best Home Charger Test. For more information, check out the description below. And if any umbrella manufacturer wants to support us as well, that would be very much appreciated because it is currently pouring with rain and I'm getting very wet. So as I was saying, the Model 3 is no spring chicken. It first appeared almost 7 years ago, but it has had loads of updates along the way. In the early years, there were changes to the interior, there were bigger batteries, and there's been a near constant stream of over-the-air software updates. And then at the end of last year, there was a big facelift, and that brought the first significant changes to the Model 3's looks. So you've now got these slimmer, less bulbous headlights, redesigned tail lights, and there are some new alloy wheel designs. These are the standard 18-inch Photon wheels, but you can pay £1,500 to upgrade to silver 19-inch alloys that have a 10-spoke design. The biggest and definitely the most controversial changes are in there though, and we're going to be taking a look at those a little bit later on. But one of the biggest reasons for choosing a Tesla over any other brand of electric car are these things. They are, of course, Tesla supercharger stalls, and there are more than 1,100 of them dotted around more than 115 different locations in the UK. Some of those locations, including this one here in Dorking in Surrey, are open to non-Tesla EVs. But at the moment, that's a relatively small number, around 30 or so. And the process of charging an actual Tesla is much easier because all you do is you plug the car in, just like that. Whereas if I were in any other EV, I'd need to first download the Tesla app to my phone, I'd need to find this location, I'd need to check the stall number down there, press on that, and only then would charging actually begin. It's also worth knowing that if you're a Tesla driver, you pay less. So at the moment, it's off peak, I'm paying 39p per kilowatt hour to charge this Model 3. Whereas if I were in a BYD Seal or a BMW i4, I'd either have to pay £10.99 a month to sign up to Supercharging membership to get that rate, or I'd pay 53p per kilowatt hour as a guest, and that's quite a big difference. And there's more because the Model 3 communicates with the Supercharger network when you drive along. So if I plug a charging location into the sat-nav, it'll tell me how many stalls are available there, the price I'll be paying per kilowatt hour, and even the percentage of charge that I'll have left in the battery when I get there, something we've found to be surprisingly accurate. And on top of all of that, when I get close to the charger, it'll start to precondition the battery, so when I get there and plug in, I'll be able to take on charge as quickly as possible. You don't even have to pick out the supercharger that you want to use, because if I wanted to say go to Edinburgh now, I could just plug the address into the sat-nav and it would tell me where to stop to get there as quickly and efficiently as possible. How quickly can it charge? Well, this is the long-range version and it can accept up to 250 kilowatts of power. That's a lot. It's more than an i4, a Seal or a Polestar 2, and it means a 10 to 80% charge in ideal conditions can take as little as 27 minutes. Now, the rear-wheel drive version of this car has a lower maximum charging speed of around 170 kilowatts, but because it has a smaller battery, a 10 to 80% charge actually takes slightly less time, around 25 minutes, although obviously you'll gain fewer miles during that time. If you're charging at home using a 7 kilowatt wall box, expect to wait 12 hours for a 0 to 100% charge in this long range model, or about 9.25 hours if you go for the rear wheel drive car. Quick, easy charging is obviously a very good thing, but ideally you want to be stopping as little as possible. So how does the Model 3 stack up compared with its newer rivals for range? Well, very well actually. This is the long range model. It has the longest range of any Model 3 as you might expect, and its official range is 390 miles. For comparison, the best BYD Seal, that can do 354 miles, the BMW i4 365 miles, and the VW ID.7 up to 383 miles. In fact, the only direct rival that has a better range than this on paper is the Polestar 2, and that can manage up to 406 miles. Even if you go for the cheaper rear-wheel drive version of this car, then that has a very competitive range of up to 318 miles. As for how far you'll actually be able to get in the real world, well, we actually put this very car into our annual winter range test about a week or so ago. We drove it with 11 other EVs from fully charged to completely empty, so the car wouldn't drive along anymore at all. Far from ideal conditions, about 10 degrees, pretty windy, a lot of standing water on the road, not unlike today really. And it managed 293 miles. Now for context, the ID.7 that did 268 miles and the Seal 255 miles. In fact, the only car that managed to beat this was the way more expensive Mercedes EQE, and even then only by 7 miles. In the summer, you can expect around 340 miles from a charge in this long-range version, or if you go for the cheaper rear-wheel drive, then expect 220 to 270 miles, depending on the weather. So the Model 3 can charge quicker than its rivals, and it has a longer range than most of them too. And that's even more impressive when you consider that it has a smaller battery than all of those cars that I've just mentioned. So the one in this long-range version has a usable capacity of 75 kilowatt hours, and if you go for the cheaper rear-wheel drive version, then that capacity drops to 58.5 kilowatt hours. And it's the Model 3's incredible efficiency that means it doesn't need such an enormous battery as its rivals to travel so far down the road. Even in the winter, this long range will do 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour easily, which is significantly better than any Seal or ID.7. And in the summer, or if you go for the lighter rear-wheel drive model, that efficiency will be even better. And obviously better efficiency means you'll be spending less on electricity for every mile you travel. But is the Model 3 just about cold, hard numbers, spectacular efficiency, fast charging speeds and a long range? Those things are very important and they will make your life easier, but they're not necessarily going to get you excited. Well, the good news is the Model 3 does have a sense of humour. You can do all sorts of frivolous things using this 15.4-inch infotainment screen here. You can make fart noises, you can play computer games, you can watch Netflix, even make the car do its own light show for you. But it isn't all about gimmicks because it's fundamentally a very good infotainment system as well. Yes, in an ideal world, we would prefer a separate rotary controller interface as well as the touchscreen like you get in a BMW i4. But if you're going to rely solely on a touchscreen, at least make it a nice big one like this, because it means all the icons are spaced out well rather than being crammed together like they would be on a smaller screen. This screen is also very impressive for clarity, and it responds incredibly quickly too. There's barely any delay at all between me pressing an icon and anything actually happening. It isn't all good news though, because the Model 3 isn't available with smartphone mirroring at all. So I can't use Apple CarPlay or Android Auto to mirror certain apps like Waze, for example, onto the infotainment screen here. But it's a relatively small complaint because this system is so good. There are some apps on here like Spotify, for example, and the sat-nav is actually based on Google Maps. So it's very good at picking routes and diverting you around traffic. And as I mentioned earlier, it is of course permanently linked to the Supercharger network as well. There are some bigger problems though. So we've always complained that it's a little bit fiddly to adjust the door mirrors and the steering wheel in a Model 3, because first you have to go into the touchscreen here, tell the car that's what you want to do, and then fiddle around with these tiny scroll wheels on the steering wheel there. But at least that's something you're not going to be doing very often, and if someone else has been driving, you can recall your own settings by pressing an icon here on the touchscreen. The bigger problem is that now, since the facelift, you have to use the touchscreen to engage a gear. So you swipe up here to go forwards and swipe back to hit reverse. And that is just a bit annoying. You can also use this touchpad up here, but that's not illuminated. So you have to press it once first, so you know which part of the touchpad you need to press to engage drive or reverse. And again, it's just unnecessarily fiddly. We would have preferred Tesla just left the stalk behind the steering wheel here. And you may also have noticed there's no stalk on the left side of the wheel either, and that's because the indicators are now touchpads on the steering wheel. Now, the idea of indicator buttons on the steering wheel isn't actually a bad one. You'll find them on Ferraris and Lamborghinis, for example. But there, the left indicator is on the left-hand side of the wheel and the right one is on the right. Here, as you can see, they're both on the left side of the wheel. One is just above the other. And I've driven this car for hundreds of miles and still it hasn't gone in which one I need to press to go left and right. So I have to look at these symbols to make sure I'm not going to confuse drivers behind. It isn't all a backward step though, because these seats are now more supportive. There's more bolstering around the sides, and mercifully you don't need to use the touchscreen to adjust these. There are some proper controls, buttons and switches down here on the side of the seat. The interior feels quite a bit plusher than it did on the pre-facelifted Model 3 as well. Early Model 3s were a little bit inconsistent for build quality. You often found some flimsy bits of interior trim and some dodgy panel gaps on the outside as well, actually, whereas this feels really well put together. And there are some nice materials in here as well. It's not quite up there with a BMW i4, but it's definitely classier in here, and you'll find fewer hard and scratchy plastics than you would in a BYD Seal. So quality is roughly on a par with the ID.7, which is a more expensive car than this. Not much in the way of personalisation though, so you either need to choose whether you want black seats, which come as standard, or these white ones, but they cost an extra £1,100. Storage space, as before, is very impressive. You've got these two wireless phone charging pads just at the bottom of the touchscreen here, and that is also the place you'll need to put the key to engage drive or reverse if you haven't downloaded the Tesla app. There is a big storage cubby in the center console just behind it here, a couple of cup holders a bit further back, and then there's more storage under the central armrest here. The door bins aren't that big, but you'll still easily be able to fit a decent sized bottle of water in them. And there is a glove box. It's a decent size, but annoyingly, the only way to open it is by using the touchscreen. In the back, the Model 3 has always been pretty roomy actually. I'm just over 6 feet tall. This seat here in front is set up for my driving position. And as you can see, enough legroom and plenty of headroom as well. I would have a little bit more space for my knees in an ID.7, that is a longer car, and I'd have a little bit more space for my feet under these seats as well. But certainly this is roomier in the back than a BYD Seal or an i4. The seating position is a bit more comfortable than it was in the pre-facelifted Model 3 because the seat back angle is a little bit more reclined, so on a longer journey you just feel a little bit more relaxed, a little bit more comfortable. But still, the floor is quite high relative to the seat bases. So as you can see, for someone of my height, then I don't really have any under thigh support at all because my knees are being forced up a bit towards my chest. And one thing that no rival comes with, even as an option, in fact, you'd have to pay extra for it if you bought a Range Rover or a BMW X7, is this rear screen down here. That is really impressive. It means you can watch Netflix or YouTube back here. Your kids can put on their Bluetooth headphones, not disturb you too much in the back on a longer journey. You can also use it to play computer games. You can adjust the air conditioning, and you can even switch on or off the heated seats. So as I say, something that no rival is available with even as an option, and that's a really strong selling point of the Model 3. But even more impressive is the boot. You get a powered tailgate as standard, and if you look in there, you'll see loads of space, and that is before you've lifted up the boot floor and you find this huge well underneath. Now that can be used to store the charging cables or keeping things out of harm's way, but if you utilise all of that space together, you'll fit 8 carry-on suitcases in the back here without folding down the rear seats. That's more than you'll fit in a Volkswagen ID.7. Although that car does have a hatchback boot, whereas this is a saloon, so the opening is fairly small. If you want a hatchback and you want a Tesla, then there is, of course, the Model Y. That isn't the only storage that the Model 3 has though, because under the bonnet you'll find what Tesla calls a frunk, and we managed to fit an extra carry-on suitcase under there. Now, even if you're not that familiar with Teslas, you probably know they have a reputation for being fast, and this long-range version of the new Model 3 is definitely no exception. It can do 0 to 60 in just 4.2 seconds. That is seriously rapid, and actually before the facelift there was a performance version that was even quicker. That could do 0 to 60 in around 3 seconds, and it's tipped to make a comeback pretty soon. So if you absolutely must have insane acceleration, that might be worth waiting for. But for most buyers, the entry-level rear-wheel drive version is more than quick enough. It only has one motor driving the rear wheels. The long range has a second motor on the front axle to give it four-wheel drive. But even the rear-wheel drive will do 0 to 60 in less than 6 seconds. And to be honest, performance has never been a concern we've had about this car. If we had any complaints about it, they were related to ride comfort and refinement, and both of those things were addressed in the facelift this car had at the end of last year. So let's start with refinement. Now, before its facelift, there was quite a lot of tyre noise in the Model 3. It wasn't very quiet, even by electric car standards, so on long motorway journeys, it could become quite tiresome. This car, though, is a lot quieter. Even at 70 miles an hour, there's a lot less road noise, and it just feels as though there's more insulation inside the car. There's a bit less wind noise as well. And then we come to ride comfort. Now, Early Model 3s were fairly firm, not uncomfortably crashy, but definitely set up to be sporty rather than comfortable. And the suspension on this car is a bit softer. That's a good thing. It means that it deals with quite badly surfaced roads, including the one I'm driving along right now, pretty well actually. It's not class leading for ride comfort, but it is better than a BYD Seal, and I'd say the only direct rival that is noticeably more composed than this is the Volkswagen ID.7, and obviously that is a little bit more expensive. That softer suspension hasn't come without a price though, because the Model 3 has lost a little bit of its agility, but we're talking relatively small margins. This is still lighter than almost any other EV in its price bracket, so it's pretty agile. And although the steering is quite light, even if you put it in its heaviest setting using the touchscreen, but you get a reasonable sense of connection with the front wheels. And it's also incredibly accurate, so you're going to have no problems placing this car confidently, even if you're driving quite quickly. The brakes deserve a special mention because in a lot of EVs, the pedal can be quite spongy, quite grabby, because when you press it, the regenerative side of the brakes kicks in, and it means that you're never quite sure how much pressure to apply to slow the car at the rate you want to. Whereas in this, all of the regenerative side of things is dealt with when you lift off the accelerator pedal. So the brakes are just like a normal petrol or diesel car, and that means you can judge very easily how much pressure you need to put on the pedal to slow down smoothly. And that brings me on to two good and two bad things about the Model 3. A lot of electric cars have phone apps, but Tesla's is definitely one of the best. It always seems to work, which is a good start, and it gives you all of the information you need. And if you've spec'd enhanced autopilot, you can even use it to summon your Model 3 out of a tight parking spot, although this car doesn't have that, so I can't show you, which is a bit rubbish. This glass roof is huge and it lets loads of light inside the Model 3's interior. And the best thing is, it comes as standard. If you want an electric sunroof in a BMW i4, you'll need to spend more than £1,000 extra. The automatic windscreen wipers are absolutely terrible. Sometimes when it's raining quite heavily and you can barely see where you're going, they only give you one swipe every 30 seconds or so, and then others, when it's spitting very gently, the wipers go absolutely crazy. To be honest, I don't really use the auto setting very much at all. I find myself just selecting a constant speed. There isn't a button on the car itself to unlock the charging cables, so if I'm using a Type 2 connector like this and I suddenly decide I want to stop charging, then I either have to go inside the car and use the touchscreen to unlock the port, or have to fire up an app on my phone and then click an icon to release the cable, and that's a bit annoying. Tesla also has some of the best assisted driving tech around. You get something called autopilot as standard, which combines adaptive cruise control with a self-steering function. We've found the system smoother and generally more reliable than similar tech from rival brands, but it isn't perfect and is best left to motorway driving where there are clearly defined lanes. You can pay £3,400 to upgrade to enhanced autopilot. That adds automatic lane changing and the summon feature I mentioned earlier. Or there's full self-driving capability for £6,800. That name is slightly misleading because you can't sit in the back and check your emails while your Model 3 drives you to work. You're still legally in control of the car and must always keep your hands on the steering wheel. But it does give the Model 3 the capability to automatically stop at traffic lights, and then in the future will give you access to a new auto steer function for city driving that Tesla is currently working on. So there are clearly still an awful lot of reasons to choose a Model 3 over other EVs, and we haven't even come to arguably the most appealing thing about this car yet, and that is the value that it offers. As I've already said, this is the range-topping long-range version, and it costs a whisker under £50,000. That's less than any i4 or ID.7, despite the fact that this car is faster, it has a longer range, and it comes incredibly well equipped. As standard, you get automatic climate control, adaptive cruise control, vegan leather seats, heated and ventilated in the front and heated in the rear, a heated steering wheel, keyless entry using an app on your smartphone, as well as all of the stuff we've talked you through already, including the panoramic glass roof, the rear infotainment screen, and electric front seats. The thing is though, you get all of that stuff with the entry-level rear-wheel drive version, plus it has a good range, it's quick enough, and it costs £10,000 less than the long range to buy. In fact, it's more than £5,000 cheaper than an entry-level Seal. That is the version we'd recommend, and is why we reckon the Model 3 is still the best electric car that you can buy. Thanks for watching, don't forget to subscribe, and if you want to watch a road trip of the new Model 3 against the Seal and the ID7, click there. Or if the Model 3 isn't quite practical enough for you and you need a bit more space, why not check out our video of the Model Y by clicking there.